A fierce wind howled through the pine trees on the Oregon hills like the cry of an invisible army. Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating an old oak tree standing majestically in the yard. Its trunk, as massive as a temple pillar, was scarred with the cracks of time, its roots burrowing deep into the earth like giant fingers clutching an untold secret. In the midst of the storm, Rex, a German shepherd with a dark golden coat and eyes bright as amber, let out a low growl. In a flash, he darted to the base of the oak, frantically digging into the damp soil. His sharp claws tore at the ground, sending wet mud flying. Clang! The metallic sound echoed through the rainy night, sharp as a knife. Marcus jolted, his heart pounding, and rushed out with a flashlight. The beam cut through the rain and wind, revealing the shallow hole Rex had dug. There, in the wet mud, a piece of metal glinted. Marcus knelt, his hands trembling as he picked up the strange object. He wiped away the mud, and the inscription appeared under the flickering light. Mitchell, James E. 336 49871, U.S. Army. Marcus held his breath. The unfamiliar name sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't Walter Croft, his grandfather. It wasn't anyone in his family. He looked up at Rex. The dog sat silently, its fur soaked by the rain, its eyes glowing under the light, as if questioning, "Are you ready to face the truth?" In that moment, between the thunder and the howling wind, Marcus felt a deep sense of foreboding. A secret had just been pulled from the earth, and it would never let him rest again. Marcus clutched the dog tag in his hand, his mind reeling. It had been 20 years since he'd set foot here. After his parents' death, the family house on the hill had been left vacant and silent. He had travelled the world in the military, only to return to America with a soul full of scars. Marcus had served in Afghanistan. In a haunting memory, he saw himself and his squad entering a village riddled with IEDs. It was Rex, then a young service dog, who had detected a mine by the roadside, saving the entire squad from certain death. From that moment on, Marcus and Rex became an inseparable pair. Rex was more than just a companion. He was the anchor that kept Marcus from sinking into the darkness of PTSD. But now, here in his own homeland, under the Oregon forest rain, Rex was leading him to a different truth, not about a distant war, but about his own flesh and blood. Marcus recalled the evening sitting by the fireplace long ago. His grandfather, Walter, with his silver hair and raspy voice, would say, "Marcus, some things are best left in the past." Back then, young Marcus thought they were just vague words of wisdom. But now, with the dog tag of a stranger in his hand, those words suddenly became a chilling warning. The family house loomed in the flashes of lightning, its roof covered in moss, its wooden walls dark, its windows opaque. When Marcus pushed the door open, the hinges shrieked, like a wail from time itself. Dust filled the air. The scent of mildew mingled with the smell of pine from the hills outside. Rex went in first, sniffing everything, his claws clicking on the hardwood floor. Marcus flipped the light switch. The fluorescent bulb flickered, casting a sickly yellow light on the walls, covered with black and white photos. There was Walter, in his World War II uniform, a stern expression on his face. Beside him, Margaret, with a gentle look, but a hint of sadness in her eyes, as if she always hid a secret sorrow. On the shelf, there were still thick books with peeling leather covers. An old armchair covered with a worn blanket stood there, as if waiting for its owner to return. Marcus stopped in front of a larger photo. His grandfather Walter stood with a group of young soldiers. His face was stern, while the soldier next to him, tall, lean, with a bright smile, was a complete stranger. Marcus's chest tightened. Could that be James Mitchell? Rex growled. He bolted up the stairs, heading straight for the attic. Marcus hesitated, but followed with his flashlight. The attic door creaked open as the wind gusted in, and dust fell like a small shower. In the beam of the flashlight, several wooden crates appeared, marked with faded US Army insignia. The thick layer of dust proved they hadn't been touched in decades. Marcus bent down and opened a crate. Inside were some tattered uniform fragments and a notebook with scorched edges. He opened it with a trembling hand. The pages were yellowed. The pencil strokes hurried. A scribbled passage read, "James no longer trusts Walter, a traitor in the group. The treasure cannot be returned to the States." Marcus froze. The names James and Walter appeared together in a dark context. It couldn't be a coincidence. Rex barked loudly, digging under a pile of wood scraps. He pulled out a small tin box. Marcus opened the lid. Old photos of Walter and James. They stood close together with forced smiles, their eyes half friendly, half hiding something. A memory flickered. Marcus remembered asking his grandfather about the year 1944. Walter always evaded the question, only saying, "a special mission." Then he would change the subject. Now, with the notebook and dog tag in his hands, Marcus understood that his grandfather had buried a whole part of his past. But what shook him even more were the love letters in the tin box. The handwriting was soft, the address sent straight to Margaret. In the letters, James confessed his feelings. "You are the only light in the darkness of war." Marcus's heart ached as he read. This was not just a military secret, but a love triangle buried for decades. He placed his hand on the photo of his grandmother. Had she ever hidden this pain in her heart? Was his father, the son of Walter and Margaret, truly of Walter's blood? The thought made Marcus dizzy. Suddenly, a loud noise, as if something heavy had fallen, echoed from the floor near the kitchen. Rex's ears perked up, and he let out a fierce growl. Marcus aimed his flashlight, discovering a floorboard near the kitchen was ajar, revealing a dark gap. He knelt down, reached into the gap, and pulled hard. A cold draft hit his face, a musty, pungent smell. It was an entrance to a basement. But before Marcus could take another step, the fluorescent light flickered and went out. The house plunged into a dense darkness. Outside, the wind howled and the windows rattled. Rex let out a long, mournful howl that echoed through the house, urgent like a warning. He placed his two paws on the floorboard, his claws scratching the wood, as if confirming, "The secret is here." Marcus clutched the dog tag tightly, swallowing hard. He knew that from the moment Rex had dug up that rusty piece of metal, his life had been pulled into an inescapable vortex. Thunder boomed deafeningly, a window flew open, and rain lashed into the house. Marcus stumbled to keep hold of his flashlight, the beam sweeping down into the gap. For a brief moment, he saw something glinting below, reflecting metal. His heart raced. It could be a weapon. It could be a safe. It could also be something much worse. Rex let out a low snarl, then a long howl, the sound reverberating through the roof. Marcus tightened his grip on the flashlight, muttering, "Grandfather, what did you really do?" The flashlight went out. The entire house swallowed him in darkness. Only the sounds of the rain and wind and the heavy beat of his own heart remained. The morning light filtered through the dusty curtains, casting weak beams into the old living room. After the storm, the ancestral house was steeped in the smell of mildew and silence. Marcus jolted awake in the worn armchair, his breathing ragged, his back soaked with sweat. The dream still haunted him, He saw the old oak in the yard transform into a gaping black gate leading to an abyss. His grandfather, Walter, stood on the other side, his face cold, his hand clutching something. As Marcus reached for him, the ground beneath his feet gave way, and he could only hear Rex's long howl echoing, pulling him back to reality. The dog lay right at the foot of the chair, its head resting on the old rug, its ears perked up. Even when Marcus slept, Rex was on guard, just as he was during their days in the field. Marcus bent down and stroked the thick fur, which was still damp from the night's rain, whispering, "You're always here with me, aren't you?" Rex wagged his tail slightly, his eyes gentle yet alert. Memories of Afghanistan came rushing back. Marcus clearly remembered the sweltering heat of Kandahar, the smell of dust and gunpowder, the drone of helicopters in the sky. During a patrol, Rex had stopped, barked fiercely, and pulled hard on his leash. Marcus listened, signaling his squad to halt. Seconds later, an IED exploded right ahead, a flash of fire and smoke erupting as the ground shook. Without Rex, the whole team would have been turned to dust. From that moment on, Marcus knew his life was intertwined with this dog. On the battlefield, Rex was his second pair of eyes. In everyday life, he was the anchor that kept him from sinking into the depths of PTSD. Marcus stood up and walked through the dusty hallway. The house, once filled with family memories, now felt like an abandoned museum. The dark wooden walls and creaking floors beneath his feet were thick with the smell of mildew and pine. He stopped in front of the large portrait on the wall. It was a picture of his grandfather, Walter, in his uniform, his stern eyes looking straight out of the frame. In his childhood, Marcus had seen him as a hero, a shining example. But since last night, when Rex dug up the dog tag with the name James Mitchell, that image had begun to crack. On the shelf near the window, a photo of his grandmother Margaret remained. The woman with her hair in a neat bun, her eyes gentle yet melancholic. Marcus remembered her singing him lullabies on summer days, the smell of baked apple pie wafting through the house. In his childhood eyes, she was the epitome of warmth. But now, after reading the love letter James wrote to her, a sense of doubt swelled in Marcus's heart. Perhaps all her life she had silently harboured a secret, and her tenderness was just a facade to hide a deep-seated wound. He reached out to touch the photo, and Rex suddenly let out a soft bark. The dog stared at the frame before looking back at Marcus. That small gesture sent a shiver down his spine, as if Rex also sensed the hidden sorrow in the woman's eyes. Marcus returned to the wooden table where he had left the scorched notebook he found in the attic. The musty smell of the paper was strong as he turned each page. The hurried pencil strokes revealed phrases. "James no longer trusts Walter. There's a traitor in the group. The treasure cannot return to the States." Many pages were torn out, leaving jagged edges. He frowned. Who tore them out? Walter, to bury the truth? Or Margaret, after discovering it? A sudden strong gust of wind blew through the crack in the door, making the notebook pages flutter. A small yellowed piece of paper fell out, so fragile it nearly turned to dust. Marcus picked it up, his hand trembling, and on it was a crude drawing with a few faint symbols and a clear circle with an X marking a spot that looked exactly like the oak tree. His heart sank. Rex approached, growling softly, his eyes fixed on the map, as if recognizing the familiar scent of the earth. He sank into the chair, his mind spinning with the fragmented pieces. The dog tag, the diary, the love letter, the map. It all revolved around Walter and James. This wasn't just a military secret. It had intertwined itself with love, marriage, blood, and family honour. He remembered his childhood evenings, sitting on his grandfather's lap, listening to war stories. Walter would talk about honor, loyalty, and sacrifice, but he never once mentioned James. Why? He never once spoke of a map or a treasure. Why? Marcus held his head, his breathing shallow. In his mind, the sound of the wind whistling through the door crack mixed with the sound of bombs exploding in Afghanistan. A familiar tremor spread through his body. He was falling into a PTSD spiral. Images of his comrades falling, the smell of burnt flesh, the echoing screams, it all came rushing back. Marcus clenched his hands, his body contracting. Rex immediately pressed close, placing his head on his lap, breathing steadily. That steady presence gradually pulled Marcus back. He hugged Rex, whispering hoarsely, "You're the anchor that keeps me tied to this life." Suddenly Rex's ears perked up, and he barked loudly. He lunged toward the bookshelf, scratching hard at the bottom drawer. Marcus opened it, and a cloud of dust billowed out. Inside was a yellowed envelope with no name on it. He pulled out the letter, his eyes fixed on each trembling line. "To the one who finds this, please forgive me. I chose to stay silent, for the truth would have destroyed everything." It was Margaret's handwriting. Marcus sat frozen. So she knew. She had chosen to remain silent her entire life. The letter didn't reveal the specifics, but the torment in every stroke of the pen was undeniable. He pictured her, living with her husband, while her heart held the memory of another man. Marcus folded the letter, sweat beading on his forehead. Rex whimpered softly, his sad eyes seemingly empathetic to the torment in Marcus's heart. Outside, the sun was high, and light streamed into the room, illuminating the floorboard that had been shifted since the night before. Marcus looked down, the cold air from the gap rising like the earth's breath. He remembered the faint sound of metal clanging from below. Last night, the storm had masked everything. But now, in the morning silence, the sound was clearer, a steady, rhythmic knock. Marcus moved closer, his heart pounding. Rex walked beside him, growling low. He shined his flashlight into the gap. The deep darkness swallowed the light. But for a moment, he saw a flash of metal. His breath hitched. Down there could be a weapon, a safe, or even human remains. He clutched James Mitchell's dog tag, whispering tremulously, "What did you leave down there?" Rex tilted his head, his amber eyes reflecting the flashlight beam, glowing in the darkness. The room was heavy, as if holding its breath. Marcus could feel the family's past, the ghosts of his grandfather and James Mitchell, all condensed in that dark basement. And he knew sooner or later he would have to open that door. The house fell into a thick silence. There was only the rapid beat of Marcus's heart, his shallow breaths, and Rex's steady growl, like a drum urging him on. The past had risen, and it would give him no way to retreat. The afternoon in Oregon was heavy with fog. Faint streaks of light pierced through the thick clouds, illuminating the old oak tree in the front yard. Marcus sat on the porch steps, a cold coffee cup in his hand, his eyes vacant as he stared at the damp yard after the storm. All morning, his mind had been circling the things he'd found. The dog tag, inscribed with James Mitchell's name, the scorched notebook, his grandmother's yellowed letter. He tried to piece them into a complete picture, but the more he thought, the more tangled everything became. The pieces didn't fit, as if someone had deliberately torn away a crucial part of the puzzle. Rex lay beside him, his head resting on his front paws, his ears always perked up. His eyes were fixed on the oak tree. Suddenly, he sprang to his feet, let out a soft bark, and charged straight for the tree. Marcus put his coffee cup down, his heart pounding. Rex began to dig, his claws tearing into the damp earth, the scratching sound echoing in the silent yard. Marcus hurried over. The displaced soil revealed a rectangular tin box, rusted but intact. Rex barked excitedly, his tail wagging furiously. Marcus knelt down and used the dagger he always carried to pry the lid open. The metal screeched, the lid popped off, and a strong smell of rust and decaying paper escaped. Inside, stacked on top of each other, were black and white photos, a few carefully folded letters, and a thin notebook. Marcus picked up the first photo, his heart constricting. In front of him were two young soldiers in uniform, arms around each other, smiling brightly. One was Walter, his grandfather, a familiar face though much younger. The other, with bright eyes and a vibrant smile, was undoubtedly James Mitchell. Suddenly, the name etched on the dog tag came to life, no longer just a cold inscription. Marcus flipped to another photo. It was his grandmother, Margaret, when she was young. She stood between Walter and James, her hands gently clasped in front of her chest, her smile soft. But there was something different in her eyes, a hesitation, a fleeting emotion that was hard to decipher. Marcus sat frozen, his mind a jumble. It turned out their relationship was not as simple as the family stories he had always known. He opened a letter. The delicate handwriting stretched across the yellowed page. Margaret, if this war ends, I hope to return, no longer having to hide in the shadows. You are my only light. The letter was signed James. Marcus felt his heart tighten. All his childhood, he had built on the image of Walter and Margaret as the perfect couple. But this letter revealed a different truth. His grandmother was once loved by another man, perhaps even more deeply than by her husband. Rex snorted, nudging the thin notebook with his snout. Marcus's hands trembled as he opened it. The pages were covered in cramped writing, many stained with mud. The words, written in a shaky hand, appeared. June 15th, 1944. Special mission, per superior orders. Heard it's related to Nazi gold. Walter keeps silent, but his eyes are different. I fear we have a traitor among us. Marcus swallowed hard, continuing to read. We found the map. The treasure is hidden near the barracks. Walter insisted it could not be brought back to the States. I don't understand why. Many subsequent pages were torn out, with only a few fragmented words remaining. The key, the oak tree. If I disappear, look for... Marcus gripped the notebook, a chill running through him. Every word felt like a knife cutting into his belief in his grandfather. Did Walter betray his comrades to keep the treasure for himself, or was James the traitor trying to frame him? Marcus looked up, meeting Rex's gaze. The dog didn't bark, just quietly stared toward the yard, where the shadow of the oak tree stretched under the sunset. That look made Marcus shiver. It was as if Rex was reminding him, the answer is still down there. Unable to stand it any longer, Marcus pulled out his phone and called an old friend from the Veterans Association, a seasoned sergeant named Harold. After a few rings, a raspy voice answered. James Mitchell? I remember that name. The records say he deserted in 1944, but a lot of his file was tampered with. It's a mess. I heard some of the old soldiers whisper that James went missing on a strange mission. Some said he uncovered some kind of secret and never came back. Marcus frowned. Are you sure the records were tampered with? Harold sighed. In war, there are many things no one wants to record. Some soldiers just vanish, and the easiest way is to mark them deserted. But I never believed James was a coward. He was respected by many of his comrades. Marcus thanked him and hung up. The answer didn't bring him relief. If James was truly framed, the person behind it must have been powerful or had a personal reason to hide the truth. And if it involved his grandfather Walter, this truth could tear his entire family apart. Rex nudged Marcus's leg, pulling him back to the present. The dog whimpered softly, then ran to the bookshelf in the living room. He nudged his head against another drawer. Marcus opened it, and a cloud of dust flew out. Inside, he found a few more photos and a thin envelope. In the letter, he found a second piece of a map, a crude handwritten sketch with the scrawled words clearly marked, Oak Tree, Key. Marcus held his breath. The first map already mentioned the oak tree. Now, another piece also pointed to it. The oak tree was not just a symbol. It was the focal point of the entire secret. He looked at Rex, whispering, "You know, don't you?" Rex responded with a look of glowing intensity. As darkness fell and the fog thickened, Marcus put on his jacket, grabbed a shovel, and went out to the yard with Rex. A sliver of a new moon appeared and disappeared behind the clouds, casting a pale light on the old oak. The air was still, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the sound of the shovel hitting the damp ground. Each swing of the shovel felt like a blow to Marcus's heart. The mushy soil slid away, and the smell of mildew and the woody scent of the tree roots filled the air. Rex eagerly dug alongside him, his barks low and excited. The deeper Marcus dug, the faster his heart pounded. Then the shovel hit something hard. A hollow metallic sound rang out. He knelt down, his hands trembling as he brushed away the dirt. A small iron box was revealed, covered in green rust. He used his knife to pry it open, and the lid popped off, revealing only a single rusty key inside. Marcus lifted it up. It was ice cold and ancient. A faint letter was etched on its body. M. He took a deep breath. This could open a safe, a wooden chest, or something buried even deeper. He clutched it tightly, feeling as if he were holding the soul of the past. Rex barked loudly, the sound echoing through the misty night. Marcus looked up, scanning the dark yard. The wind whispered through the hills, like the voices of the departed. He felt as though the heavens and earth were witnessing this moment. The old oak, a silent witness, was slowly revealing the truth it had held for 80 years. Marcus stood there, clutching the rusty key, with Rex by his side, his eyes shining brightly. He knew this was only the beginning. The clues were starting to connect, and the path ahead would lead him into an even deeper darkness of the past. His grandfather Walter, James Mitchell, his grandmother Margaret, they were all waiting for him in the basement and in the secrets yet to be uncovered. Dawn broke, and the fog rolled in thick like a white curtain over the Oregon hills. Marcus sat in the living room, a pale light filtering through the dusty windows. On the table, the rusty key lay beside the two pieces of the map, next to the black and white photos and the love letter James had sent his grandmother Margaret. Everything was laid out like evidence in a case that had never been tried. Rex lay nearby, his head resting on his paws, his eyes fixed on the key. Marcus examined it once more. Despite the rust, the carvings were still visible, the letter M faint but steadfast. What did M stand for? Mitchell? Margaret? Or a secret symbol? He spun the key in his hand, a sense of unease welling up inside him. The more he thought, the more he recalled his grandfather's words from long ago. Some things are best left in the past. Now, every piece of evidence screamed that the past was not asleep. It was rising, demanding that Marcus confront it. He decided to reread the scorched notebook carefully. The hurried lines of writing detailed the special mission. A group of soldiers was ordered to recover Nazi gold left behind during the German retreat. In the untorn pages, James repeatedly mentioned treasure that could not be brought back to the States and a key under the oak tree. Marcus frowned. If James wrote that, it meant he had discovered a dubious plan, and if the torn pages were real, who would want to erase them? Rex got up, circled the table, and then stopped in front of the bookshelf. He sniffed and let out a soft bark. Marcus walked over and pulled out an old file folder. The papers were yellowed, with faint remnants of a seal. Inside were a few newspaper clippings from the 1940s. US unit missing during Ardennes forest patrol. Some soldiers suspected of desertion. On the margin of one paper, a note was scribbled in pencil. Not true. The truth is different. Marcus's hand trembled, certain this was the handwriting of James or someone else in the group. He remembered the times he'd sat listening to Walter's war stories. His grandfather often avoided the topic of the Ardennes. A special mission was all he would say before changing the subject. Now those newspaper clippings matched James's diary. A grim picture emerged. A gold hunting mission, missing soldiers, a hidden secret. Marcus opened another letter from the tin box. The words were smudged with tears. If I do not return, know that I was never a traitor. The traitor is someone else. The letter was signed J.M. Marcus swallowed hard. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. James died an unjust death, and Walter was involved. He turned on an old laptop and searched for digital records. After a few hours of digging, he found a copy of a military file. James Mitchell was officially noted as missing, presumed deserted, 1944. But the reporting officer section was blank. Even stranger, Walter Croft's file had a note about meritorious service in a special mission, maintaining national security. Why were two contemporary files so contradictory? Marcus felt as if he was being pulled into a deep hole. He wondered, if Walter was truly a traitor, were his medals and glory all a lie? Had his entire family lived on a foundation of deceit for 80 years? Rex came closer, placed his snout on Marcus's knee, his eyes fixed on the key on the table. Marcus sighed, gently scratching behind his ears. You're right, Rex. This key is the linchpin. Night fell, and the wind howled fiercely over the roof. Marcus couldn't sleep. He took his flashlight, grabbed the key, and went to the kitchen. The loose floorboard from a few nights ago was still there. He pulled it up, and a blast of cold air hit his face. Rex barked softly, then nimbly jumped down first. Marcus shined his light. A wooden staircase led to a pitch-black basement. Each step felt heavy as a stone. The air was musty, with the pungent smell of rotten wood and rusty iron. At the bottom, the flashlight beam hit rough stone walls covered in green moss. In the middle of the basement was a large wooden chest with a rusted iron lock. Marcus's heart pounded wildly. He held the key, took a deep breath, and inserted it into the lock. The dry click echoed, a small sound that exploded in his chest. The lock sprung open. Marcus's hands trembled as he opened the lid of the chest. Inside, covered by a layer of rotten cloth, were old military canvas bags. He pulled one out, and a cloud of dust billowed up. When the flashlight beam hit it, shimmering golden ingots were revealed. Marcus was stunned. Nazi gold, the very treasure the world had thought lost. But there was more. In the corner of the chest was another notebook with a hard leather cover and a stack of documents with Nazi seals. Marcus quickly flipped through them. The pages contained encrypted messages, lists of names, and transport plans. This was not just gold. It was a trove of classified files. He skimmed a few lines. Agreement, exchange, Croft. The name made Marcus freeze. Croft, it was Walter. The documents suggested that Walter had secretly contacted a German officer, exchanging something for the gold and the documents. Marcus sank to the cold floor, his mind reeling. His grandfather, a hero in the eyes of his family and country, could have been the traitor, the one who killed James to cover his tracks. Rex growled, his eyes shining brightly in the darkness. Marcus held his head, breathing heavily. He didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was screaming. The gold, the files, the diary, it all pointed to the same horrifying truth. The wind whistled through the basement cracks like a whisper from the past. Marcus looked at Rex, muttering, "If this is true, what should I do, Rex? Keep it a secret to protect my family's honor, or expose it to give James justice?" Rex placed a paw on Marcus's hand, his eyes steady, as if to say, "We have to keep going. We can't stop." Marcus clenched his fist, a look of resolve in his eyes. The journey to find the truth had gone far beyond his imagination. Now he had no way to turn back. The oak tree, the basement, the gold ingots and the files. It had all pulled him into this vortex. And the final answer was still waiting for him ahead. Dawn descended on the Oregon hills, a pale grey hue covering the sky, signalling another gloomy day. In the old wooden house, Marcus sat at a table, in front of him a jumble of papers, scorched diary fragments, a torn love letter, and the yellowed map that Rex had dug up. They were all like pieces of a larger puzzle, but the picture still lacked a complete border. He rubbed his forehead, his eyes tired from many sleepless nights. Questions flooded Marcus's mind. Who was James Mitchell? Why was his name linked to his grandfather Walter? And how did everything, from the dog tag to the love letters, point back to the old oak tree outside? Rex came over, nudging Marcus's hand as if to tell him to rest. But instead of resting, Marcus pulled his old laptop closer and turned it on. The screen lit up, casting a blue light on his gaunt face. He opened the browser and typed James Mitchell, 1944, MIA, into the search bar. The results were faint snippets of information, a list of missing soldiers, a few old articles, and dry, sparse text that had been covered by the dust of time. Marcus read every word, piecing them together. James wasn't just missing. A brief report had him listed as a deserter. Marcus frowned. Everything he knew about James, a close comrade of Walter's, a secret love of Margaret's, was in complete contradiction to that cold conclusion. He made a note, writing it by hand in his notebook. Each word felt like a knife carving deeper into his mind. James was betrayed. Rex barked softly again. He circled around and stopped in front of the bottom of the staircase. Marcus narrowed his eyes. "What is it now, Rex?" The dog scratched hard at the rug, then looked back at his owner. Marcus pulled the rug away, revealing a few loose wooden planks underneath. His heart suddenly pounded. He used his hunting knife to pry them up. A dark space appeared, and a cold draft wafted up. Rex lunged forward, sniffing frantically. Marcus shone his flashlight down, a narrow passage, leading deeper. He took a deep breath, then slowly stepped down. The wooden stairs creaked under his feet. The damp, mouldy smell rose, as if this entire space had been forgotten for decades. When the flashlight beam swept across, Marcus gasped. In front of him was a small cellar with crumbling dirt walls and a low ceiling. In the middle of the cellar, covered in dust and cobwebs, was a rotted US military uniform. Beside it, a few white bone fragments embedded deep in the earth. He stepped closer, the light stopping at a faded metal plate on the uniform's chest. Marcus's hand trembled as he wiped away the dust. The engraved letters appeared. James Mitchell. Marcus stood still. His entire body felt frozen. Every theory, every suspicion was now clear before his eyes. James had not disappeared on the battlefield, nor had he deserted. He had died right here, in the Croft family's cellar. Rex whimpered softly, pressing his head against Marcus's leg, as if to keep him from falling. On the floor, an old wooden box lay on its side. Marcus opened it. Inside was a thick, yellowed envelope. He opened the letter, his hands shaking. The scrawled lines appeared, the ink smudged, but still legible. "If someone finds this, here is the truth." Walter had a change of heart. He wanted to keep the gold and sell the documents to the enemy. I objected and he ended my life. I hold no hate. I just hope that one day the truth will be known. Please tell Margaret. I never stopped loving her. Marcus dropped the letter, his whole body trembling. It wasn't just a betrayal of a comrade, but a betrayal of family. Walter, the hero of the family, had killed his fellow soldier and taken everything: the gold, the love, the honor. Hot tears streamed down his cheeks. Marcus clutched the letter, kneeling before the skeleton. "I promise you, James, the truth will not be buried again." His voice was hoarse, echoing in the silent cellar. Rex sat beside him, his eyes shining in the flashlight's beam. He was like a loyal witness, watching that vow being made. Marcus took out his phone and photographed the scene, every single detail. He didn't need to call anyone right away. He knew that everything had to be documented before it was forgotten again. The photos, the letter, the uniform, they were all evidence. When he went back up, Marcus closed the wooden planks and laid the rug back down. He knew that from this moment on, he had become the one who carried the truth. There was no turning back. He sat down at the table and opened his laptop. The words appeared on the screen as he typed, "A brief, concise report with the photos attached." He didn't write it flowery, just the naked truth. Before sending, he paused and looked at Rex. The dog tilted his head, his eyes seeming to ask, "Are you sure?" Marcus nodded softly. "We've come too far, old friend. The truth needs to see the light." He hit the send button. A gentle ding rang out. It was done. Marcus leaned back and closed his eyes. Images of James, images of Walter, all came rushing back like a film. But this time, he no longer avoided them. He faced them, and then let out a long sigh of relief. Rex placed his snout on Marcus's leg, his steady breathing pulling him back to reality. Outside, the wind blew through the old oak tree, its leaves rustling. The tree had hidden a secret for 80 years, and now it seemed to breathe a sigh of relief that the truth was finally set free. Marcus looked out the window, a new determination rising within him. He would not let James forever be buried as a traitor. Night fell. Marcus lit a candle and placed it on the table beside the evidence. The flame trembled, illuminating his face. He wrote in his diary, "Today I saw the skeleton of James Mitchell. He did not desert. He was murdered, and the one who murdered him was my grandfather. I write these words so that if one day I disappear, the truth will still exist." He closed the notebook with a sigh. Rex lay beside the table, his eyes never leaving him. In that silent moment, Marcus realized the journey did not end with finding the truth. The real journey began the moment he chose to reveal that truth, no matter the cost. He reached out and gently stroked Rex's head. "We still have a lot to do." Rex wagged his tail, his eyes shining brightly. The atmosphere in the room was no longer heavy. Despite the dark past, a new path had opened, the path of justice. Marcus stood up and blew out the candle. In the darkness, there was only Rex's steady breathing and his own heart, stronger than ever. The night rain draped a thin curtain over the wooden roof, the rhythmic patter on the old steps making the ancestral home seem to sigh. Marcus sat alone in the living room. In front of him, a folder from the FBI, the paper still smelling of chemicals. The bolded words on the first page drilled into his mind. Preliminary analysis results. Walter Croft is directly linked to the disappearance of Private James Mitchell. There is a very high probability of his complicity in an act of treason. He read it for the third time, but his heart still refused to believe. His grandfather's face in the photo on the wall seemed to look down with a tranquility that felt cruel. Rex lay at the foot of the table, his ears perked up. Hearing the slight rustle of paper, he raised his head, his amber eyes silently following every change in his owner's face. Marcus reached out and placed his hand on Rex's head, his palm shaking slightly. "We've come too far, old friend," he whispered. "But some things are really hard to swallow." Rex pressed his cheek against Marcus's knee, as patient as always. He stood up and pulled back the window curtain. Outside, the old oak was dark, its rain-soaked canopy glistening. Under that giant shadow, everything had begun. The dog tag, the tin box, the love letter, the map, the key, the chest of gold. Marcus looked up, holding his breath, as if hoping the rain would wash away the smell of the past. But the thing that clung most stubbornly wasn't the mud, but the sense of betrayal rising in his chest. He reopened the leather notebook he'd found in the basement. On a page near the end, a shaky handwriting was smudged with ink. Walter took the gold. He said everyone would die if the truth was brought back to America. I hid a copy of the files where he wouldn't expect it. If I disappear, know that I did not desert. Below that, 3 words were scratched forcefully. "Don't trust Walter." Marcus was stunned. A copy of the files? Where? Rex suddenly got up and walked towards the door leading to the kitchen. He barked twice and then turned, his eyes urging Marcus on. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and followed him down. The floorboard he had once lifted was now back in place. He removed it, and a cold, damp draft hit his face. The old wooden stairs creaked under the weight of 2 bodies, 1 man, 1 dog. The basement was empty after the FBI took the chest of gold, leaving only a rectangular dust mark on the floor. Rex walked around, then stopped abruptly in the eastern corner where green moss clung thickly. He scratched the ground hard and barked urgently. Marcus knelt down, shining the light closer. There, the stone foundation tiles were uneven, revealing a faint crack. He found a crowbar and pried at it. The stone came loose with a dry clang. A cold wind rushed up from the darkness below, the ancient, deep smell of old earth. A narrow tunnel appeared, its stone walls weeping moisture, the ceiling so low that Marcus had to crouch. Rex went first, his nimble body slipping through the darkness. Marcus followed, his breathing mingling with the sound of dripping water. At the end of the tunnel was a small chamber, like a burial vault. In the centre, covered in a rotten cloth, was a rusty safe with the faded symbols of an eagle and a swastika. Marcus's hand felt cold as it touched the damp metal. He pulled out the rusty key, the one that had opened the chest of gold, and carefully inserted it into the lock. The click echoed, heavy as a gavel sealing a fate. The lid of the safe cracked open, a cloud of dust billowed up, and the smell of old leather and decaying paper mixed together. There was no gold inside, only a single leather pouch tied with a string, a small wooden box, and a few envelopes with cracked wax seals. Marcus opened the leather pouch. What met his eyes was a typed list detailing secret exchanges between a group of American officers and German representatives in the final months of the war. One name stood out, repeated over and over. Sergeant Walter Croft. A handwritten note in the margin sent a chill down his spine. Exchanging gold and documents for military secrets. Committed to eliminating witnesses who pose a risk of exposure. prioritizing internal handling. At the bottom was a scrawled signature, WC. Marcus collapsed onto a stone bench, his ears ringing. Walter didn't just hoard gold. He was a link in a network that exchanged information with the enemy and was willing to eliminate his comrades to silence them. He turned to the second envelope. Inside was a blurry photo of two soldiers in the woods. One was Walter, the other was James. The photographer stood far away, at an angle. On the back of the photo was a pencil note. The last night. The small wooden box made Marcus hesitate. He opened the lid and found a chipped pocket watch. Its glass face cracked. Its hands stopped at 2:17. It came with a small piece of paper. For M. Marcus stared blankly at the letter. Was M for Mitchell or Margaret? Or was it just for memory? Rex nudged his snout, took a light sniff, and looked at Marcus with a strange gaze, partly sympathetic, partly urging him on. Continue. He took the last envelope. The wax crumbled under his fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter in blue ink, the script firm, not shaky. Marcus, if you are reading this, it means you've gone far beyond what I intended to hide. I did what I had to do to survive. History won't understand. Don't let hatred bury your future. Signed, Walter Croft. Marcus let out a hoarse, soundless laugh. Survive by killing your friend, he whispered in the stone chamber. His voice echoed off the walls, breaking into meaningless fragments. Up on the wall, his grandfather's image had cracked. Down in the cellar, every page was a detonation of inexcusable darkness. He gathered all the files, tied the pouch, and carried it out of the tunnel. Back in the living room, Marcus placed the leather pouch on the table and immediately called the assigned agent. I just found another safe and a set of files. There's a letter from Walter too. On the other end of the line, a woman's voice lowered. We're on our way. Don't touch anything else. While waiting, Marcus slumped to the floor, leaning against the chair. Rex lay close, his steady breathing like a distant drumbeat. He closed his eyes, listening to the rain beat on the wooden roof. The nights in Afghanistan suddenly came back, the roaring sound of an IED, the clatter of dirt and rocks falling on his helmet, the hot breath of Rex against his side. The fear then was clear, tangible. The fear now was vague. The fear that the truth would change everything he thought about himself. The agents arrived, bringing sealed boxes and a UV light. They took photos, collected evidence, and signed off on the report. One of the quiet men looked at Marcus and said, "We need an additional statement. Are you willing to face an official conclusion that Walter Croft was a traitor?" Marcus looked him straight in the eyes. "I am. And I'll sign every page." Late that night, as the FBI vehicles drove away, the house fell back into silence. Marcus opened the back door and stepped out onto the porch. The oak tree was a black streak against the night. He lit the fireplace, the first spark flickering, then bursting into flames. The firelight flickered across the photos on the walls, moving past Walter's face and stopping at the old picture of Margaret. Her eyes in the photo seemed to be wetter from the firelight. Marcus's heart suddenly softened. She had lived her entire life in silence, and perhaps that very silence had saved him from growing up in hatred. Dawn broke, and the fog still lingered on the Oregon hills, draping them in a thick, heavy white shroud. Marcus sat on the front porch steps, a cold coffee cup in his hand, his eyes staring blankly into the distance. Rex lay right beside him, his head resting on his paws, his amber eyes glittering with the reflection of the damp sky. The long night that had passed felt like a dark dream, but everything was real, from the safe in the ground to the pages of the file bearing Walter Croft's name. there was no turning back. Fragments of memory swirled within Marcus. His grandfather had once taught him how to tie a knot and pitch a tent in the woods, telling him, "A soldier must hold on to his honor." But that honor had now turned into a lie. Every page of the file, every letter James had left behind, was like a spear piercing through the facade Walter had put on. Marcus tightened his grip on the coffee cup. The cold ceramic soaked into his hand, reminding him that the past could not be erased, only confronted. He stepped inside, walking past the hallway lined with family photos. Walter's face in the uniform photo, with his stern gaze, was once the pride of the entire family. But now it only filled Marcus with a choked-up feeling. He stopped in front of the picture, sighing. "Grandfather, I can no longer protect your image, but I can still protect the truth." The words echoed softly in the silent space, like a confession and also a promise. Marcus gathered everything that remained: the map fragments, the old letters, the scorched diary. He placed them in a small wooden box, locked it carefully, and put it on the table. This would be the remaining legacy, not for glorification, but for remembrance. Rex sat by his side, watching every move, his ears twitching slightly at the sound of the lock clicking shut. Outside, the wind blew through the oak, its leaves fluttering down. Marcus walked out and touched the rough trunk. So many secrets had been buried under this tree, and so many truths had been dug up from it. He gently closed his eyes and whispered, "James, you've finally been given justice. I just hope your soul can rest in peace." That day, Marcus didn't contact anyone. He spent the time cleaning the house. Every corner, every old object reminded him of Walter and Margaret. The creaking wooden chairs, the faded curtains, the old vase on the table, all seemed to hold a past that was both gentle and venomous. Marcus wiped away the dust, but he knew the real dust was in his heart, not so easy to brush away. Rex followed him every step of the way. When Marcus stacked the books, Rex gently placed his snout on his lap, his eyes shining with a quiet determination. It was as if he was saying, "You're not alone. I'm here." Marcus smiled for the first time in many days, though the smile was faint. "You're right, Rex. You went through the war with me, and now you're with me through this darkness." In the afternoon, Marcus took Rex to the field behind the hill. The cool wind blew, and the green grass stretched far. Rex ran and jumped, kicking up mud, his ears flapping in the wind. Marcus watched him, a sudden sense of relief washing over him. In this open space, there were no traces of a gold chest or classified files, only a wide sky and simple loyalty. He suddenly realized that the past might be heavy, but the present was still pure, and the future was still open if he was brave enough to keep going. As the sun began to set, Marcus returned home. He lit a candle on the table, placing it in front of the photos of Walter and Margaret. Not to honour them, but to have a dialogue. The flame swayed, and the yellow light fell on the aged faces in the pictures. "You chose silence, but I cannot. The truth needs to be spoken, so no one else has to bear the burden of an injustice like James." Rex lay beside the table, his eyes fixed on the candlelight, as if he too were listening. That night, Marcus wrote in his diary. He recorded the entire journey from the day he returned to this house, discovering the dog tag, digging up the tin box, opening the cellar, finding the gold and files, and finally, the secret safe. Each page was like a knife cutting into his heart, but he wrote without stopping. When the last page was closed, he let out a sigh, feeling lighter. If one day I am gone, at least whoever reads this diary will know that the truth was found. Rex curled up under the table, his breathing steady. Marcus looked down, feeling a warmth spread through him. This dog didn't need honor, didn't need medals. It just needed companionship. In his eyes, Marcus wasn't the grandson of a traitor, but the friend he had survived with. Realizing that, Marcus felt a sense of comfort. The next day, Marcus decided to act. He went to the oak tree and dug a small hole next to the roots, placing a glass jar inside containing copies of the key documents, so that if someone in the future finds them, they will know the truth. Nothing can be buried again. He filled the dirt back in, his hands trembling but his eyes brighter. Rex stood nearby, his tail giving a soft wag. In the afternoon, the church bell echoed from a distance. Marcus sat on the porch, listening. The sound rang out, like a farewell to the past. He nodded slightly. In his heart, he knew the journey of redemption wouldn't end in one day, but it had begun, and the first step was the courage to admit the truth. As night fell, Marcus lit the fire in the fireplace. He sat silently, watching the flickering flames. Images suddenly appeared. Walter smiling while fishing, James writing a letter in the barracks, Margaret quietly sewing by the window. They all came back, not to haunt, but to find closure. Marcus whispered, "I forgive, but I won't forget. I forgive so I can live, but I won't forget so history can be corrected." Rex placed his head on Marcus's lap, his eyes gentle. Marcus gently stroked his back, feeling his slow, steady breathing. In that moment, he knew he was no longer the grandson carrying the burden of darkness. He was a free man, because he had chosen justice over silence. Marcus knew he hadn't truly let go yet. There were still undercurrents in his heart. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw Walter's face mixed with James's eyes. He stood up and opened the window to let the night wind in. The scent of damp earth, pine leaves, and the chirping of crickets stretched on like an endless flow of time. He wondered if the truth would ever truly be accepted by people, or if it was just a cycle of being retold in the least painful way. But he knew. Silence was no longer an option. Rex came closer, nudging his hand with his nose, making Marcus jump back to reality. "You're right, old friend," he said softly. "We're alive, and being alive means facing things." The dog wagged his tail, a gentle but strong wag that pulled Marcus out of the abyss of his thoughts. He felt a small warmth inside, like a tiny flame on a rainy night, but a persistent one. He walked around the house, looking at each object as if for the last time. The wooden table with the knife marks from his childhood, the window where Margaret used to place her flower pots, the stairs where Walter used to sit and sharpen his dagger. They all became witnesses, not just to a crime, but to a family that had existed with all its ups and downs. Marcus placed his hand on each one as if to say goodbye. On the table, the candle was almost gone. Its melted wax solidified into a stream. Marcus sat down and wrote a few final lines in his diary. "Redemption is not for Walter, but for us, the survivors. I will not let that darkness spread to the next generation." When he put the pen down, he felt lighter, as if a part of his soul had just been set free. When the clock struck midnight, Marcus closed the door and turned off the light. On the table, the half-burned candle still flickered, its light trembling. He whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, a new life begins." Rex walked beside him, their shadows stretching long on the wooden wall, and then disappearing into the quiet night. Dawn came slowly, as if to give Marcus one last moment of quiet before he left the ancestral home. The fog still lingered on the Oregon hills, with each white streak hanging in the air like a silk ribbon, making the sky look both ethereal and heavy. On the weathered wooden roof, droplets of night dew glistened golden as the sun appeared. Marcus stood on the porch, his hand resting on the old wooden railing, the rough feeling under his skin reminding him that every grain of wood here had witnessed generations of his family pass through. His old backpack rested on his shoulder with little inside, just a few changes of clothes, the diary he'd kept, and the small wooden box containing copies of some of the documents. The most important things, the gold, the classified files, had been handed over to the FBI. He only took what was necessary for his own life. The house behind him, with all its darkness and lies, had served its final purpose: to expose the truth. Rex stood close by, his body solid, his amber eyes looking up at his owner. He didn't fully understand the weight of historical secrets, but he understood Marcus's state of mind. The loyal dog sensed every small change in his companion, from his breathing to his stride. This morning, he also clearly saw one thing. Marcus felt lighter, as if he had just put down a giant boulder. Marcus turned to look at the house one last time. He gently opened the door, stepped inside, and walked down the hallway lined with family photos. The dim light fell on Walter's stern face in the old picture. Marcus stopped for a long time, looking into those eyes. There was a time when this gaze was a symbol of pride. Now it was only a symbol of mistaken choices. Marcus was no longer angry, only a sense of calm remained. He whispered, "Grandfather, I'm going to live the rest of my life differently. I won't keep your secret, but I'll keep the lesson that the truth, no matter how cruel, is more important than anything else." He went into the kitchen, placing his hand on the wooden table that was scarred with knife marks. His hand glided over the surface, a silent goodbye. He went down into the basement one last time. The place that once held the gold, that once imprisoned so much guilt, was now empty and cold. He stood in the darkness for a few minutes, taking a deep breath to feel the last echoes. Then he turned and walked away, without looking back. Returning to the living room, Marcus picked up a few more small items. Walter's hunting knife, the old lighter from his time in Afghanistan. These things didn't carry the weight of lies. They were simply tools for survival. Rex followed, his claws clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor, the sound echoing in the empty space. As he went outside, Marcus closed the door behind him. The wooden door creaked, the sound like a final sigh from the house. He didn't lock it. There was nothing left to keep here. The house was now just a shell. Its soul had gone with the past. Marcus walked to his pickup truck. Rex nimbly jumped into the passenger seat, his large but agile body turning once before settling down. He looked at Marcus expectantly. Marcus placed his hands on the steering wheel, took a deep breath, and started the engine. The sound echoed through the quiet valley. The truck rolled onto the narrow dirt road, its tires crunching on the damp, decaying leaves. Through the window, Marcus saw green fields, straight rows of pine trees, and a river reflecting the light. The morning air was so fresh that he felt as if he was being cleansed. With every meter the truck travelled, a layer of heavy dust seemed to be lifted from his heart. As the truck drove past the yard, Rex suddenly turned to look back. His amber eyes were fixed on the old oak tree. The tree still stood there, defiant, gnarled, its roots deeply embedded in the earth, the place that had both buried and revealed all the secrets. Rex watched for a long time, without blinking. His gaze was profound, as if he wanted to etch that image into his memory forever. Marcus caught the look in the rearview mirror. He suddenly felt as if Rex was speaking in his own language. "We did the right thing." A wave of emotion washed over him. He pressed the gas pedal a little harder, but the corners of his mouth turned into a smile. For the first time since he had set foot here, Marcus was truly smiling. not forced, not hidden. It was the smile of a man who had just stepped out of the darkness. The road leading out of the valley began to widen. The fog gradually dissolved, and sunlight bathed the grass in a golden glow. In the passenger seat, Rex stretched, his tongue lolling out to catch the breeze. His fur fluttered, radiating vibrant life. Inside the truck, the atmosphere was light, a stark contrast to the tense days that had passed. Marcus rolled down the window, taking a deep breath of the cool air. A single thought echoed in his mind: freedom. Not the grand freedom of a nation, but a personal freedom, from a family ghost, from a legacy of lies. He was no longer the grandson of the traitor Walter Croft. He was just Marcus, a man, a veteran, with his loyal dog by his side. The road ahead twisted along the hillside, then connected to the main road leading down the valley. The sky was wide and clear, and flocks of birds flew by, their wings flapping rhythmically like a drumbeat of departure. Marcus gripped the steering wheel lightly, feeling a new fire ignite in his chest. It didn't matter where they were going. What mattered was that the journey had begun. Rex lay comfortably, his head resting on the window frame, his eyes half closed, enjoying the morning breeze. Marcus glanced at him and smiled. "We have a whole world to see, old friend," he said softly. Rex gave a small bark in reply. Far in the distance, the pine forest parted, revealing a radiant horizon. Marcus steered the truck toward it, his heart filled with a new sense of faith. The past had closed, and another chapter of his life was opening. It didn't promise absolute peace, but it was his own, no longer defined by any darkness. The small truck continued to drive through the sea of sunlight, leaving behind the old wooden house and the old oak tree, where the past had been exposed. From now on, it was all about the journey ahead, where Marcus and Rex would continue to write their story, with light, with freedom, and with courageous choices. And in the sky, the clouds slowly dissipated, leaving behind an endless expanse of clear blue. Some secrets are buried in darkness, seemingly forever. But the light always finds its way back, through a pair of hands, through the loyal eyes of a dog. Marcus left, not carrying gold or false honor, but carrying the truth. And sometimes, the truth itself, no matter how cruel, is the greatest gift of liberation for a man and for a family.